Welcome to the 17th episode of the Tertius Times podcast. I'm your host, Brian Wright, and I want to focus our attention on three articles on religious persecution and human rights abuses for today. As I announced yesterday, there will be no interview segments for this week, but I have two interesting interviews scheduled soon, and those will be coming out in the next couple of weeks, so stay tuned. Today, we look once again at both Afghanistan, India, and China as well. The links to the stories are in the description. As I also announced yesterday, there's an upcoming USERF event you are invited to join. It's entitled Strategies for Religious Freedom in Fragile States and will take place online next Wednesday, September 22nd at 10:30 a.m. That's Eastern Time. Registration is open now and is free. Details will be provided at the end of the podcast. The link to register is also in the description. This first article, Afghan Minorities Fear Persecution, from the Arkansas Democrat Gazette, September 4, 2021, reports that despite the fact that Afghanistan is 99.7% Muslim, 10 to 15% of that figure are Shia and are now at greater risk of persecution from the majority Sunni-led Taliban. The few non-Muslims in the country, having for generations been the objects of abuse, face an even increased risk after the withdrawal of U.S. forces. When the Taliban first controlled the country in the 1990s, quote, Afghanistan was home to more than 200,000 Sikhs and Hindus, unquote. Even as recent as August 16th of this year, quote, there was one Jew, 50 Hindus, and 450 Ahmadis in Afghanistan, unquote. Ahmadis, as the article states, follow Islam but are considered heretical to the larger Muslim world. However, as we learned from the interview with Aryan and Ahmad, the one Jewish gentleman recently fled the country. Jim Carr, who serves on USERF, adds that those minority sects, quote, have really been decimated, unquote, with a sharp decline in those groups. Quote, Christians and Baha'is, unquote, the article reports, are unable to worship openly. No counts were available for either group, Carr added, unquote. Blasphemy, apostasy, and non-Islamic proselytizing are all illegal and in some cases can carry the death penalty. Quote, we have deep concerns for Christians and other religious minorities in Afghanistan, unquote, said Chelsea Patterson Sobolik, acting policy director of the Southern Baptist Convention's Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission, unquote, as stated in the article. Although the Taliban claims, quote, they've learned from their past mistakes, unquote, and are making efforts to be more tolerant, others, like Niala Mohammed, a USERF senior policy analyst, remains cautiously optimistic. I think it's too soon to tell, she said, if they have changed their ways. USERF hopes that they do actually change and are inclusive of religious and ethnic minorities and do pay attention to the rights of women and children as well, unquote. Pray again for Afghanistan, that those who live there may do so safely, and those who have left will continue to work for their country's freedom. Pray again for the Taliban, that its adherents may discover the truth enshrined in the biblical command, love your neighbor as yourself. Pastor Ankush Bariyar once reported to the police station in Chhattisgarh State, India, for being accused of, quote, illegal religious conversions, unquote, was beaten in the station by 50 radical Hindu nationalists. According to the article, pastor beaten by mob of extremists in police station in India from International Christian Concern, September 11, 2021. As we saw in the article from yesterday, conversions of Hindus to Christianity or to Islam is viewed as a threat by those same radical Hindu nationalists who believe India should only be home of Hindu-related religions. One anonymous witness stated the beating of Pastor Bariyar, quote, happened as if it was well planned. I think the police knew about the attack before it took place. It is sad that Christians are not safe even inside the police station, unquote. Pastor Bariyar stated the police, alert to the fact the mob was after the pastor, finally intervened only after he had been abused. According to the article, Dr. Arun Panalal, president of the Chhattisgarh Christian Forum, stated, quote, "We have the right to choose any religion and propagate that religion. This is a fundamental right given by the Constitution. This needs to be taken to the highest level of law and order in the state," unquote. Based on so-called, quote, anti-conversion laws, unquote, which make forced conversions illegal, these have been used by Hindu radical nationalists to bring legal pressure upon and in many cases abuses against Indian Christians. Finally, William Stark, ICC's regional manager for South Asia, said, quote, "Religious intolerance and religiously motivated violence have become so normalized that attacks on Christians in the presence of police outside the station have come to be expected. The only thing that has shocked Christians here is the location of the attack, not the attack itself. Strict action must be taken against the perpetrators of this attack and the police officers who have allowed this climate of impunity to exist," unquote. Pray for India, particularly in Chhattisgarh state, where those who live there can live in peace and tolerance. Pray for the Christians who live there, that they are protected and safe. Pray for those who are radical Hindu nationalists, also called Hindutva members, that they too would realize the truth of the statement, "Love your neighbor as yourself." Allegations against China's brutal treatment of Uyghurs in its Xinjiang province, including torture, rape, forced abortion, sterilization, birth control, arbitrary arrests, forced labor, and internment camps, were made by Uyghur exiles in what is called a, quote, Uyghur Tribunal, unquote, held in London. As reported in China Slam's second session of Uyghur Tribunal investigating Xinjiang human rights abuses, from Radio Free Asia, September 9th, 2021. China, not surprisingly, has protested the findings of the tribunal, which had to circumvent the International Court of Justice because China, although having signed and ratified the, quote, Genocide Convention, unquote, also submitted, quote, a reservation against the International Court of Justice jurisdiction, unquote. Predictably, China's foreign ministry spokesman Zhao Lijian called the tribunal, quote, a kangaroo court, unquote, and, quote, another farce, unquote, against the Western Chinese province, also pointing out most of the funding for the tribunal is from what Lijian calls, quote, an organization dedicated to separating Xinjiang from China, unquote. Other invectives, such as, quote, absurd accusations, unquote, quote, lies and rumors, unquote, were also launched against those who participated in the tribunal. Since Chinese authorities accuse Uyghur Muslims of being separatists and terrorists, the fine line between genocide and anti-terrorism is blurred enough to keep stronger condemnation of China's atrocities at bay. However, as the article points out, in October 2020, quote, the US State Department removed the ETIM, or the East Turkestan Islamic Movement, from its designated terrorist list, unquote, thus removing that possible barrier from putting more pressure on China. The report concludes that, quote, the tribunal is expected to issue a final verdict on whether China is committing genocide or crimes against humanity in December. Another round of the tribunal is scheduled for September 10th and 13th, and more information can be found at their website, Uyghur Tribunal. Pray for China, particularly those who reside in Xinjiang or East Turkestan province, that they would be able to live their lives free of oppression, domination, and manipulation by the Communist Party forces. Pray for the leaders of China, again, particularly those in Xinjiang, that they, like those in Afghanistan and India, would recognize the eternal significance of the simple plea to love your neighbor as yourself. This is again a reminder that if you are interested and can make it, this hearing on religious freedom is scheduled for next week, and you can join by registering free through the link in the description. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you found the information presented here useful and that it encouraged you to pray for these areas of concern and perhaps even inspired you to take positive steps of involvement to alleviate the suffering of so many around the globe. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time.